Greetings. Warm welcome to everyone. We're so happy to host you for today's special event on International Women's Day. Today is a great day to collectively reflect on women's human rights and gender equality. We have a fantastic reason to all be here today. That is to celebrate our 2021 award winner, Ms. Audra Lowe. My name is Atia Bilkataria, and I will be your MC. Since this is a virtual event, we encourage you to participate by asking questions in the World Bank live chat, where we have our MIGA colleagues standing by to answer your questions. If you're tuning in through Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter, we encourage you to leave comments and use the event hashtag Gender Leadership Award. Without further ado, I would like to invite the Executive Vice President of MIGA, Hiroshi Matano, to kick us off.
Greetings and welcome everyone to the MIGA Gender Leadership Award. It's a pleasure to be with you on International Women's Day. We take great pride in hosting this event. And in the 6 years that MIGA has celebrated the award, we have made a strong effort to highlight women in senior roles who, through their personal examples, have created opportunities not only for women, but for the industry they work in. We're lucky to be able to tell these stories. Today, we recognize Ms. Audra Lowe and pay tribute to her accomplishments, as well as her leadership in promoting gender equality. Leaders like her are moving Asia forward. They're helping bring private finance to the region and helping build infrastructure that delivers development impact. Her work inspires us, and I'm sure it will inspire you too. Gender equality is a priority for MIGA. In our projects, we screen for gender-related impacts and are committed to creating opportunities for women through clients' investment activities. Indeed, our MC today, Atia, recently assumed her role as key coordinator on gender issues in MIGA and will be our champion going forward. While much has been achieved, much remains. We look forward to working with our partners to advance gender goals and narrow gaps between men and women. Congratulations again, Audra. With that, I would like to introduce the World Bank Group President, David Malpass, to deliver his opening remarks.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here to celebrate the 6th annual MIGA Gender Leadership Award. This award pays tribute to women leaders who have made strides in advancing gender equality in their own work and who also promote the twin goals of the World Bank Group, reducing poverty and boosting shared prosperity. I would like to congratulate the 2021 recipient, Ms. Audra Lowe, for her leadership in the field of infrastructure finance. Aside from her personal achievements, Audra's nomination and background speak to two critical issues. First, how can we catalyze finance for a climate-resilient recovery in Asia? And second, how to make this recovery equitable for women who have been disproportionately affected by the crisis. Mobilizing finance for infrastructure is critical for development and for creating green, inclusive, and resilient growth. We need more leaders like Audra who are working on catalyzing this finance. I look forward to the discussion today on how we can move toward a recovery that is inclusive, equitable, and resilient in Asia, and on the key role women will play in making this happen. I congratulate Ms. Lowe again for her leadership. Congratulations, and thank you all.
Happy International Women's Day. It is an honor for me to be invited to deliver speech at this very distinguished Gender Leadership Award ceremony. I would like to thank MIGA Executive Vice President Hiroshi Matano-san for preserving this prestigious award. I would like to also congratulate for this year recipient, Ms. Audra Lowe, the CEO and Executive Director of Cleveland Capital, because gender equality, especially also in a corporation, is not going to just happen. It requires a lot of effort and support, especially from the top level. At the Ministry of Finance, in my own department, I also continue encourage my team, my staff, in order for us to be able to not only promote the woman in a managerial position, top, middle, or even lower level, but also in terms of recruiting women. Woman employee is currently 25.65% at our ministry. More than 81,000 employees that work in Ministry of Finance in Indonesia. We definitely still a long way to go from the level that I would like to see in terms of representation of women in our institution as well as in government of Indonesia institution in general. As we also see the COVID-19 happen at this very moment, which is not only creating a casualty for the people, the livelihood, the job, we also see this COVID-19 in which many people is forced to work from home, school from home. It's creating a much, much bigger burden for women all over the world. A study from many of these institutions showing that women bearing more burden when they are facing with the work from home, from taking care of their children, doing domestic work, while at the same time have to juggle with their own job or career. This is really a tough time for a woman. So having this kind of gender leadership award ceremony at this current moment, I do hope that MIGA and many institutions in the world recognize this kind of environment and situation that are facing by many women in the world. As we are all know that women still continue facing non-level playing field. Many women have to work twice harder. They have to prove twice smarter. They have to deliver twice when they are facing or receiving a certain position. Sometimes the norm also creating additional burden for the woman to play their maximum potential role, whether this is at the domestic, that is her household, as well as when they are pursuing career outside their house. For all of us, improving this level playing field is very critical. Unfortunately, women also still facing a lot of discrimination. Many of them cannot enjoy even a decent place for them to do, to actually have their children to be taken care while they are working. A child care facility or lactation facility, most of them is not available in many developing country or even in developed country. Maternity leave, which is paid, is also not yet become the right of the woman. As of from the small and medium enterprises in which women usually is the majority as a player, then access of capital is becoming very critical. And in this sense, using the technology, especially digital technology, is going to be very, very critical. So we do hope that this kind of effort can be continue promoted, because when you are trying to create a level playing field and supporting women, each player, each role model, they need to continue learn each other. All country also can look at others country experiences in order for them to be able to also apply or using a certain policy, instrument or practices in order for us to be able to continue support a woman in playing their positive role in the economy. I do hope that this kind of event in which MIGA providing award for those who's showing a strong leadership in promoting gender equality at the corporate level, at any institution, is going to also create an inspiring story and an example for others who could then can say that I can do the same in my own institution. That kind of inspiring example can accelerate more and more people, especially at the top level, that they are going to contribute an improvement of gender equality in their workplace. Happy International Women's Day for all of you, including those who especially an incredible player to promote women's equality. All incredible women who also striving to continue playing their positive role in the economy and continue also contribute their significant role to their own household. Let your voice be heard because the world needs you, and working together definitely is going to reach a better and faster result. Thank you very much.
Happy International Women's Day. Today, we join thousands of people around the world celebrating the achievement of women and men. To celebrate this, in 2016, MIGA launched the Gender Leadership Award, formerly known as the CEO Award. This award recognizes senior managers who have advanced greater gender inclusiveness within their respective organization and who have promoted gender equality while contributing to the World Bank Group's twin goals of reducing poverty and boosting shared prosperity.
This year, at MIGA's 6th Gender Leadership Award, we recognize Audra Lowe, CEO of Clifford Capital. Audra has shown her commitment to furthering gender equality in the workplace, particularly in frontline roles, functions where women's representation has historically been lacking. She has mentored women colleagues and have supported them in their career advancement, as you will see in the video. Audra's efforts set an example for women in the finance sector who have been significantly underrepresented in executive positions, representing less than 2% of bank CEOs and holding less than 20% of board seats in banks worldwide. She has mobilized private finance for vital infrastructure projects in Asia and around the world. Moreover, Audra has played a direct role in mobilizing FDI to countries which were IDA borrowers at the time of guarantee issuance. One such project is Siriganj 4 in Bangladesh, which is being supported by MIGA and is providing a stable energy source to millions in the country. In addition to her critical role in raising financing for infrastructure projects, Audra has actively championed company policies that help create a more conducive work environment for women who regularly juggle professional lives with family obligations as mothers and daughters. Today, women represent 50% of staff at Clifford Capital, and 36% of women are in functional leadership positions. Thank you, Audra, for being an inspiration to us and role model to many.
Now, please join us in watching a short video in recognition of Audra's leadership. We look forward to what Audra can accomplish next in her career.
Audra Lowe is making an impact in Asia. As the CEO of Clifford Capital, a specialist financing platform headquartered in Singapore, she's investing in the future of the continent, one project at a time.
I strongly believe that the foundations for gender equity lies in having essential infrastructure in place for governments to deliver good education and jobs for their people. The projects that we have supported go towards these objectives.
She's championing policies that support the success of women at the company, policies that recognize the multiple roles they have in the workplace and in the household. Women now represent some 36% of the functional leadership positions within the wider Clifford Capital Group.
She's absolutely committed to what we do. She is a fantastic team player. She's very inclusive, and that's very important in a relatively small organization like ours, where teamwork is so important.
MIGA has partnered with Clifford Capital to back investments that bring much-needed infrastructure to developing Asia, such as the Sirajganj project in Bangladesh.
The Sirajganj IPP project in Bangladesh is a core component of the government's goal to provide electricity to all their citizens by 2021.
A long-term US dollar denominated financing by an international commercial lender was not widely available in Bangladesh and certainly required a protection by a political risk insurance.
Built in 2019, the project is an important part of the country's growth story. Blackouts were common in Bangladesh. They slowed the economy, cutting GDP by an estimated 3% a year. Clifford Capital and MIGA backed Sirajganj with its 414 megawatt capacity to minimize the fallout from incessant power shortages. The plant has increased power generation by 3,000 gigawatt hours, reaching 5.8 million consumers.
When Semcor developed their community development program, one of the things they made sure of was that they had specific actions in there targeted to women. They do health clinics for the local communities, education campaigns, livelihood development opportunities, particularly for women. All these things are much appreciated by the local community. They were identified in cooperation with the local communities, so they're actually responding to a need that the community has identified.
The number of women holding leadership positions in infrastructure finance is low. Women represent less than 2% of bank CEOs and hold fewer than 20% of board seats of banks worldwide. But the story is changing.
Even with a gender-neutral hiring policies, over 36% of our senior roles are held by women. That's higher than the industry average.
Women are rising through the ranks in finance worldwide, Asia included. They're breaking barriers, bringing new talents and fresh perspectives to a staid industry. Audra Low is leading the charge.
As a leader, Audra is fully committed to her professional role, and yet at the same time maintaining a healthy work-life balance. She provides unwavering support and is always on hand to give advice and guidance to the team whenever we face any challenges.
Even though the numbers tell us that there's still some work to be done, as only 20% of senior roles are held by women, many of us will tell you that we do have a voice and there are very interesting opportunities for us to progress within the industry.
Developing nations in Asia need to invest an estimated $1.7 trillion per year for the next decade to sustain growth and tackle poverty while protecting the climate. With the COVID pandemic reducing investment flows to developing Asia by some 30 to 45%, the region is at a delicate crossroads. Women leaders, now at the helm of financial institutions across the region, are working to invest capital necessary to rebuild. They're creating blueprints and laying sustainable foundations for the future of Asia.
I hope that my younger compatriots can see through my example that interesting opportunities do exist out there for them to make an impact.
With Audra's example, that path forward looks clearer.
On behalf of all of us at MIGA, I'm honored to recognize Audra as this year's recipient of the MIGA Gender Leadership Award. You are an inspiration to all of us who work every day to end extreme poverty and boost shared prosperity.
Now it's my pleasure to welcome the 2021 MIGA Gender Leadership Award recipient, Ms. Audra Low, to virtually accept her award and share a few words.
Thank you to MIGA and the World Bank Group for this prestigious award. This is momentous not just for gender equality, for women leaders, but also for everyone who has played a role in infrastructure finance in Asia. As we all know, developing Asia requires some 1.7 trillion in financing annually in order to address infrastructure development needs. This is to maintain growth, combat poverty, and to address climate change. COVID, no doubt, has led to a shifting of priorities for many governments as attentions turn towards dealing with the contagion and propping up the economy. Infrastructure development, however, has not completely taken a back seat. In many parts of Asia, there still exists a fundamental need for clean water and reliable power. The pandemic has also led us to reprioritize certain types of infrastructure, including digital infrastructure that is needed for broadband connectivity and healthcare. What is heartening is that the focus on sustainable development has not abated. Amidst the sea change, financing continues to be a highly relevant consideration, particularly as government budgets are more stretched than ever before after having to deal with the pandemic. Clifford Capital is uniquely placed to address market gaps in project and structured finance and to support infrastructure development in the region. In this regard, MIGA is an invaluable partner as they provide us with political risk insurance and credit enhancement guarantees to help address some of the concerns that we have in investing in these markets. The Sirajganj 4 IPP project in Bangladesh and the Mingnian IPP in Myanmar are both great examples to showcase the strength of our partnership. Both these projects are essential infrastructure projects needed to underpin economic development and job creation, including job creation for women. Once again, I thank the MIGA for this esteemed accolade. I'm truly honored to be a recipient, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank all my colleagues at the Clifford Capital Holdings Group, including Clive Kerner and Jolene Chu, who were featured in an earlier video. This award is in recognition not only to our commitment to gender equality, but also the efforts that we have put in developing infrastructure, supporting the development of infrastructure in Asia. There's still much more work to be done in building a resilient Asia, and also to position us to tackle this pandemic and any other future challenges that may come our way. I look forward to continuing on this great partnership that we have with MIGA. Thank you.
Congratulations, Audra Lowe. Thank you so much for staying with us to share more of your insight during this next panel discussion. My name is Kaori Joji. I'm a journalist based here in Tokyo. It's my great pleasure today to moderate this panel discussion among distinguished professionals. Please allow me to introduce you to our panelists today. Hiroshi Matano, Executive Vice President at MIGA. Ekosuehi Iahen, Secretary General of the Insurance Development Forum. And Karen Groen, who is the Global Director, Gender at the World Bank. And of course, our honoree today, Audra Lowe, CEO and Executive Director of Clifford Capital. Congratulations once again, and thank you all so much for joining us here today. Hiroshi, a pleasure to see you, and if I may kick off this discussion with you, you have 30 years of experience in banking and finance, and when you took on your current role at MIGA, the Gender Leadership Award was already in place, so in a way, you inherited this award. Why did you decide to make it a priority early in your tenure, and why is gender equality important to you?
First of all, Crowley, thank you for doing this for us. As you mentioned, I've been in the financial industry for 30-some years. It has become much better, but gender equality in the financial sector, especially in Asia, is very noticeable. My personal view is that this reflects a cultural approach to gender in Asia, and a recent incident in my own country bears this out. I think this needs to change. We need to be clear that getting the gender agenda right is not only a good thing,
but a requirement for Asia to maintain its economic growth. Organizations need to be more straightforward about expectations, to be clear about what is needed to get the job done. I think this can make a big difference and open up opportunities for women at senior levels. Changing a system and culture, including my home country in Japan, is key. We have been saying this for a long time, but now it's time for action. It's because of this awareness about the problem that I feel strongly about continuing the Gender Leadership Board at MIGA.
Absolutely. Hiroshi echoes Wehi. If I may turn to you, the conversation today, I think, is not just about gender equality, but about resilience. And I think all of us have been tested in one way or another over the last year. We're still in the midst of the COVID pandemic, but with the vaccine starting to roll out, we're all trying to look beyond just the pandemic. Could you please tell me about the kinds of insurance tools that are out there to help countries as they try to rebound and tackle some of the long-term challenges, like climate change?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think as a starting point, resilience is really at the heart of what insurers do. The COVID pandemic and climate change, I think, hold specific complexities and peculiarities. They're global in nature. They can't be tackled individually by single institutions or even countries, and there is disproportionate impact on the poor and vulnerable. At the same time, despite these challenges, there's a fundamental role that insurers can play, and I'll focus maybe on just on three elements. The first is the need for better risk assessments. I think that we can all acknowledge there is a need for better information in terms of a picture of the risks that we face, but importantly, how do we translate that information into actions that governments can take? And insurers can play a very important role within this context. The second area that I think that they can also play an important role is also guidance in terms of investments in preventative measures. I've elaborated a little bit on the importance of information, but this information is not only valuable in terms of developing new products, it's also important in informing how can we do things better? What are some of the preventative measures that we can actually implement that can also support a virtuous cycle in terms of the boundaries between insurance and also risk reduction? And then finally, I think insurers have a fundamental role when we think about the kinds of new products that are needed given the challenges that we face. I think with COVID and climate change, what is clear is that institutions alone, governments alone cannot absorb the kinds of risks that we are seeing. So there's an urgency when we think about public-private collaboration and the design of new instruments, risk pooling ventures, etc. And this is also part of what the IDF is engaged in with the World Bank Group, etc. And so I think that under these three umbrellas, insurers can play a very important role when we think about resilience, because fundamentally risk management will need to play a significant role. And this is the domain that insurers can have an active contribution.
Absolutely. Karen, let's link back to the gender equality issue in the midst of COVID-19. In your mind, what do you think are some of the most significant ways in which women have been impacted by COVID-19?
There's four areas in particular, and actually let me start with women firm owners. We run surveys with Facebook and OECD. It's called the Future of Business Survey, and we've been looking at that data since last July through the end of the year and early this year. And we find that female-led businesses, particularly in the early stages of the pandemic, were 7% more likely to close than male-owned businesses. And while the gap had shrunk by the end of the year to about 4%, women-owned firms had a harder time bounding back, particularly in terms of sales and profits. And this is partly because of the sectors that they're in: retail, services, trade. Those sectors, as you know, have been hit very, very hard during this pandemic. And there's another impact that has been very important, and this affects women entrepreneurs as well as employees. With school shutdowns, women have withdrawn from the labor force in many countries, and their work caring, particularly for children as well as for the sick, has dramatically increased. And women are not necessarily going back because they lack the services to help them go back. And I think the situation won't change until we actually get to widespread rollout. So increase in care has been something that has hit women very, very hard. And the time use data show that men have helped, but not to the extent that they can. Another impact, particularly in some of in countries around the world, has been the spikes in domestic violence or gender-based violence with lockdowns, with restricted mobility. There are reports around the world of increases in this very egregious form of behavior. And it's not limited to any type of country or to any type of income group. It's something that we see globally. And I think the final piece that we see, particularly in the lower income countries where we work, is actually reduced access to certain types of health services. And that is very worrying. So in some of the countries we work in Latin America or in sub-Saharan Africa, essential services like reproductive health, maternal health, child and nutrition services have been restricted both in terms of disruptions, but also because of mobility in terms of getting there. And consequently, we see things that we haven't seen before, like increases in maternal mortality, increases in stunting and malnutrition. And these are all the kinds of things that we worry quite a lot about.
While finance is still largely considered a male-dominated sector, women are leading the change in mainstreaming sustainable finance. As trailblazers, women leaders can make a significant difference to the lives of others as sustainable finance roles rise in prominence. It is therefore important that they help to groom other budding female leaders and drive greater women's empowerment. I heartily congratulate Ms. Audra Lowe, Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Clifford Capital, for being a role model in this regard. In Asia, patriarchal values and mindsets about gender roles are still a feature. Moving social norms towards gender equality will require shifts across various policy areas, particularly in education and workplace culture. Hence, we need more women like Audra, who is a source of inspiration for many young women, one who walks the talk and provides mentorship and support networks in the workplace to boost women's career development. Governments around the world, however, play the most critical role in creating an inclusive and enabling environment for women. Ensuring girls' access to education is an essential component of empowerment in its own right. We should also remove barriers to labor force participation by women, including the provision of affordable and accessible childcare and parent care services, and availability of flexible work arrangements. In Singapore, we have dedicated 2021 as the year of celebrating SG Women. We have organized a series of conversations on Singapore women's development, together with various community partners, to identify and address issues affecting women at home, in schools, workplaces, and the community. Feedback and ideas shared by participants from all walks of life will be reviewed and distilled into a white paper, which will contain recommendations for the continued progress of Singapore women. Given that COVID-19 has had a disproportionate effect on women, I urge all of us to continue making concerted efforts to further progress in the lives of women all over the world and celebrate the leadership roles that women can play in every segment of society. Thank you.
The World Bank has been helping countries in East Asia and the Pacific navigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the impacts is the impact on gender inequality. It has worsened gender inequality. If you look at the healthcare provision, women are significantly represented in the healthcare workforce, and they've been severely exposed to the pandemic. If you look at the labor market, jobs that are held by women have been eroded faster because they tend to be in sectors like services that are highly impacted. Women also work in informal sector and don't have the labor protection, so they've lost even informal jobs faster. And women MSME enterprises have also been badly hit. So there's been a negative impact, a gender differentiated impact. And the World Bank is working to help countries address this as they look to recovery. For example, in Mongolia, in Tonga, in Laos, we're trying to make sure that the support that we provide MSMEs really targets women and focuses on them so that their enterprises can be sustained. There are challenges from the COVID for women, as I've mentioned, but there is also an opportunity for women leaders to take the awareness that has been created about the gender disequalizing impact of the crisis, to use that to raise certain particular issues, particularly the issues around women's participation in the labor force. And here, one factor that our impact evaluation shows is really important is access to good quality childcare services. So this is an area of opportunity for women leaders in the region to really push this agenda, to work with institutions like the World Bank with knowledge, with advice, and with the financing to really look at how services can be provided for women to support them, childcare services, so that they can go and participate effectively and actively in the labor market, redress the negative impact that the COVID had, and even move further than that in terms of labor force participation of women.
Audra, as the recipient of this award today, can you share with us some of the things you experienced as a female executive, an Asian female executive in infrastructure finance? Some of the challenges you overcame as you arranged some of these award-winning projects in the region.
So I have to say that as an infrastructure finance professional, working in Singapore, taking care of, predominantly projects that happen in the region, I've been quite fortunate, I would say. I haven't experienced some of the discrimination that a lot of people do talk about. And I think part of that is just having grown up in a place like Singapore, where it's a very meritocratic-based society. We do have access, equal access to great education. So in some ways, it has set women up quite well to achieve gender parity, better than in many other places. And I do see that, and these days you can see some pretty high-profile women, senior women in the industry, which is very, very encouraging. But of course, that's by no means to say that we're at gender parity yet. There's definitely still an underrepresentation of women in boardrooms and also in senior roles. So that's definitely scope for improvement. What I would say as I work in infrastructure finance is that you do notice that there is some gender imbalance in certain sectors that we cover. And the one that is most pronounced that comes to mind is actually in oil and gas. When we work on projects in those sectors, or when we talk to people who are active in those sectors, for example, when we're attending industry events, networking events, you do notice that there are very few women represented in the room. So it's not at all uncommon where I walk in and there's only me and a handful of other women. And I have another example where the person that heads up the oil and gas coverage for our company is actually a woman as well. And very often when we're working on deals, we're the only two women and suddenly the only all-women team around the room. So just from that alone, you can see that there is a bit of, there's still gender imbalance in certain areas. And I think what's a little bit more insidious about situations like this is that when you're in a minority, there is some suspicion about who you are, where you're from, do you really know your stuff? And you do have to address that pretty quickly up front. So I think from a personal, professional experience, that's kind of where I've experienced some gender inequality. I can also talk a little bit about, from a personal perspective, what that really meant. And having gone through the lockdown, just recently here in Singapore, I know some of you out there are still going through some measures of lockdown. I do think that the gender-based roles at home have we've kind of regressed, and it's become more pronounced. Women do tend to have a more dominant role in terms of childcare, in terms of domestic chores. And I think that's also the case even for high income earning women. I can speak to that from a personal experience. I do have a dominant role in making sure that my child's schooling needs are taken care of. I'm the person that makes sure that she attends all the activities that she's slated to attend and things like that. So, and I do think that it does have a bearing on our flexibility when it comes to the workplace. And what's positive coming out of the lockdown is that you realize that telecommuting actually does have a lot of benefits. It gives you greater flexibility in managing your work-life balance. So one of the things that I am hoping to see more of going forward is greater flexi work arrangements. And that's something that I have taken a personal interest in.
I would like to start by congratulating Audra Lowe for the MIGA Gender Award 2021. This is an important award for me, and I was truly honored to be the recipient last year. 2020 has been a difficult year because of the global pandemic. Many families lost the very little income they had due in part to the lockdown and restriction on people and goods movement. And the impact of the pandemic has also been felt within the bouquet communities. Just as we have always done during health crisis, we decided to provide support in the fight against the virus, but above all, to create opportunity for young women and people in the communities near our mine and help them generate an income that will mitigate the impact of the health crisis on their living condition. GAC support included the mobilization of local community members, especially women, to make soaps, masks, and other protective equipment against the virus, which we donated to the local population, our employees, and those of our subcontractors. During the first month of the project, the women produced more than 25,000 soaps and some 25,000 masks, which was entirely purchased by GAC and distributed near its mining and port sites. Some 450 temporary jobs were created by GAC COVID-19 Community Support Project. Through this project, we believe to have provided economic support to more than 3,000 people in the Bokeh region. Despite the end of this support program, the women we were mobilized to make these masks are now organized as cooperative of seamstresses. We are going to support this new small business by training them in new cutting and sewing technique, and by providing them with the necessary equipment to produce any garment. We are working with the GAC team so that they can produce our employees' uniform according to the required standard. I am convinced that we can help them become autonomous. They have determination, courage, and they really want to get out of poverty and give their children a better future. And I'm committed to helping them do that as best as we can, and with the support of organizations such as MIGA.
Listening to you, I'm reminded that it may be a collective societal goal, but as individuals, I think we all have a role to play. Hiroshi, in that sense, what does MIGA do to foster gender equality inside your own operation or with clients outside of it?
Well, first of all, I just want to echo what Audra just mentioned. I think what we have this pandemic misgivings of opportunity to rethink about our working practice and how it is possible to do remote working now. And what does that has a positive impact in improving the quality of work, especially for women who has dominant role in caretaking as a fact. So I think I just want to echo that point. And MIGA, I think that's one of the themes that we're going to have to discuss going forward, also at the World Bank Group, of course. Regarding MIGA's role, I think that's is together with what Ekosiri just mentioned, but I do think the insurance industry has a unique role in supporting these kind of changing environments. One maybe in the COVID-19, one maybe in the climate change, but also in the gender space. So there is some roles that we can play, and the World Bank Group in general has been pursuing a lot of venues that, as Karen has mentioning. So maybe supporting companies that really are led by women is going to be a big part of our program. So we want to reach out to the community, investment community. If there's any opportunities that MIGA can be involved, please contact us. We'll also be trying to mobilize private money into these projects, and there's a wider agenda for the World Bank Group to achieve. So these kind of events is another opportunity to showcase our willingness and also our capability in delivering these kind of results.
Ekoswehi, let's zero in on the insurance industry per se. How is this gender lens, if you will, being incorporated into the insurance industry so that it enters the mainstream lexicon?
Yeah, I think it's a journey. As a starting point, I would have to say that generally insurance, there is I think an oversight when it comes to women and the protection gap that women actually face. And this is an issue that we see not only in emerging markets, but also in mature markets. There was a study actually in 2015 done between the IFC, Accenture, and also AXA, which showed that women will be responsible for insurance purchases of up to 1.7 trillion, with half of that coming from 10 emerging economies by 2030. That is significant, but it also represents what I think as a tangible opportunity in terms of the potential contribution to inclusive economic development. So what does that mean in terms of how the industry is treating to this? I would say, okay, there are three areas, which is step one, building intelligence on women's insurance needs. We've heard from Audra, we've heard from Karen. There are certain peculiarities that define women and how they exist within this world. And there's a need to really unpack what are the kinds of risks that women face, the data that the insurance industry gathers. Can we be more deliberate in terms of disaggregation of that data to treat to gender issues, right? That's a fundamental starting point. Another point that I think that the industry is also progressing in terms of its journey is developing targeted value proposition for women segments. Women have, again, as I said, peculiar needs in terms of, okay, healthcare needs, etc. Are we developing products that can actually speak to that when we look at, as Audra had mentioned, the healthcare needs, the childcare needs that they have, right? I think that this is an area that we haven't done enough, and there's a need to do considerable more work on in terms of both the public sector and the insurance industry to try to develop meaningful solutions. And then thirdly, also touching on the point that Karen had raised around technology, improving distribution and proximity to women clients. Technology offers an opportunity to have better access to women to understand their needs and also develop more meaningful solutions. But again, technology is not the only solution when we think about insurance. There's also a need for education of women in terms of what is the value proposition of insurance? Why does it matter? How is it relevant to you in terms of how you manage your household, manage your family, etc.? And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I would also say that there is a need to also think about this not only as women as consumers, but also women as leaders, women as drivers of markets, developers of markets, right? And I think that the challenge that we are seeing with the kind of risks that we are experiencing also points to tapping into these opportunities, the particular perspectives that women bring in designing new innovative products. And this, for me, I think is quite an interesting and important nuance because the kinds of solutions that are needed will need to be different for the future. And so it also means understanding the client and understanding the needs of women fundamentally. So in summary, I think it's a journey for the insurance industry. There's definitely a lot more sensitivity on both sides, but really a lot more work to be done.
Even before the pandemic began, Korea Exim Bank has provided financing in more favorable terms to Korean companies that promote family-friendly work environment. Internationally, we have extended about $500 million in ODA loans to support partner countries that are hit hard by COVID-19.
The activities include financial support to pregnant women and female healthcare workers in South Asia and IT trainings for women in Latin America. What else has been done for women in our bank? Frankly, I rather encouraged my colleagues to fulfill our mandate as a pilot bank to provide the most needed assistance to the affected companies. Coming to think of it, my female colleagues are working even harder under the same pandemic, and I truly appreciate and commend their hard work. Throughout the pandemic, people have come to think about priorities in life, and this made people taking decisions that best suit their own circumstances. I think this will lead to a fast-changing environment that increases individuality and inconsistency. These changes may result in capacity gaps within the organization. To quickly respond to such changes, leaders should pay greater attention to adopting flexibility and maintaining resilience in their organizations. Leaders must also provide more learning and development opportunities for staff members while encouraging teamwork. I trust that women's particular skills for time management and ability to concentrate on the very essence of their work will eventually help us find great opportunities in the coming year.
I'd like to take a slightly more regional look and examine what some of the unique factors are in this region in Asia. Karen, when you look at Asia in particular, do you see certain critical factors that need to be addressed to improve opportunities for women in Asia?
Yes, I think there are certain opportunities that are really important and relevant right now. I mentioned earlier, well, I think there's three things, and I'll pick up on the last points as well. But the first point I think is childcare. We've been doing a lot of work, for instance, in countries like Indonesia, and we've been doing a number of studies, and we find that in work that we have done there, particularly among urban women, that the provision of childcare really helps women return to paid employment. And we've been experimenting with different models of care, and that's really important. And we've been working similarly in countries in South Asia like Pakistan and Bangladesh and India, which all now have laws for establishments with a certain threshold of employees, male and female, to provide some kind of childcare solution. And I mentioned Vietnam earlier. Vietnam has changed its labor code to extend the childcare not just for women employees, but for men. And these governments are all thinking about what would be the ways that both men and women can take advantage of having these solutions. And we know, for instance, that childcare does need to be provided with quality because that matters for children's development, and parents need to trust that the quality is good for them to be able to want to put their children into some kind of care arrangement. So that's the first thing I would say. And all of these governments I've mentioned are really on the forefront. And there are many employers that are moving forward in this area as well. The second area that I think is really important is exactly what Ekuswehi had mentioned. I think governments on the public sector and the private sector side can do much more to invest in women's leadership. And in terms of facilitating their abilities, their role models, their abilities to invent products and services. And I think whether it's in terms of soft targets for representation, it pains me, for instance, that in the infrastructure we know in Asia is a very male-dominated area. But we've started a fantastic initiative in South Asia called We Power. And the idea is to have the utilities, all of the utilities in South Asia have committed to increasing women's leadership and participation in the energy sector. And how do they do that? They're supporting alliances with the universities. They're creating pipelines. They have apprenticeship programs and mentorship programs for women to be able to progress to the top in these sectors. And I think that's really important. To do that, though, they have to also make changes in the workplace. They have to make the workplace an enabling environment for women. They have to pay attention to things like reduction of sexual harassment. They have to have the right kind of policy environment, which I'm sure Audra can speak to, flexible work policies, flexible leave policies, all of those things, there's a public and private role, and that is absolutely critical. And finally, I think the digital governments, the digital solutions, which I mentioned earlier, are really happening. There's fewer gaps, I think, in East Asia, but in South Asia, we have really big gaps between women and men in access to financial and other services. And there's some really great movement going on to digital platforms, but we need to do more in terms of e-commerce. Again, that's a regulatory issue, but it's also opportunity for women entrepreneurs to participate in these platforms. And it's not just the access to the platforms, it really is the use, and it's the confidence, and it's the networking that has to come with this. So it's a multi-sector approach, and we're seeing some really great platforms develop. We're working, for instance, in South Asia, in Pakistan, but there are platforms as well in some of the East Asian countries that we're starting to explore.
We know it is impossible to consider the state of gender equality or women's leadership without recognizing the severe impact on women of the global COVID-19 pandemic. Many people have suffered, but women, and especially women with care responsibilities, have been particularly impacted. As a result, women's employment has rapidly plummeted. The ILO estimated that 32 million jobs for women were wiped out last year in the region, many of them in South Asia. That added up to 4.6% drop in female employment compared to pre-crisis levels, which is significantly higher than the ratio applied to men. It is a result aligned with another survey that shows women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable than those of men. The need for action, therefore, is very clear. To help repair the damage in Asia and the Pacific, we need to consider gender equality first as a core economic policy, second as a business fundamental, and third as an investment opportunity. Advancing women's equality in the countries of Asia Pacific could add as much as $4.5 trillion to the collective GDP annually in 2020. That is a 12% increase over a business as usual GDP trajectory. And that is equal to adding an economy the combined size of Germany and Austria each year. That's why at IFC we are working to help close the economic gaps between men and women through our work with the private sector. It is happening in programs like Powered by Women in Nepal, where renewable energy companies commit to implementing policies and practices that help women thrive. And it is happening in our COVID response to help companies maintain operations and keep people in jobs. One example is the working capital loans IFC issued to Card Bank and Card SME Bank in the Philippines, totaling over 150 million Philippine pesos. It is expected to reach over 60,000 MSMEs to help them recover from the COVID crisis, including more than 30,000 women-owned businesses. Let me close by congratulating Audra, the CEO of Clifford Capital, for being awarded with the 2021 MIGA Gender Leadership Award. Your example leads the way, not only for other firms to recognize the business advantages of gender balance, but also for other women to be inspired by your success. Congratulations, thank you very much.
We often talk about Asia as one big block, but development cycles within the area are extremely varied. Audra, it's clear you have been and will continue to be an inspiration for those looking to enter the arena of infrastructure financing in Asia. But some of them might be wondering, as a woman, will I really be able to go to these project sites that you mentioned, to a power plant, for example, and stand on an equal footing? Can you share with us some of your experiences and what you sense in terms of changes that may be afoot?
So I can relate to quite a lot of things that Karen has mentioned. The one thing that came to mind as she was talking is the fact that when you're in infrastructure, whether it's infrastructure development or finance or operations, the one thing you can't really run away from is that there's a lot of travel. Infrastructure projects are located in far-flung places. It's not always in the cities. In addition to a flight, there's always going to be a long car ride somewhere. All these activities are extremely time-consuming. And I found that as a professional in infrastructure finance,
travel has been actually a constraint when you've got, you know, a young child at home to take care of. And so I'm actually very encouraged by the fact that technology can actually reduce some of the need for this kind of travel. Of course, you would still need to go to some of the work sites. You would still need to, you know, put on the big rubber boots and make sure that, you know, the projects that you're financing are progressing properly. But if we can even just cut down on the intensity of travel, I think that would go a long way in making sure that women stay within the industry. One of the issues that we have is not that we're not getting in, is the fact that the dropout rate tends to be higher because there's just so many other competing demands that come up along the way. And that's, you know, if we are able to retain more women in the industry, then naturally you will get more women coming to the top. And, you know, I've been fortunate that, you know, I've got the opportunity to get to the level where I am today. And I certainly hope that many more women would have similar opportunities just as I have, yeah.
Thank you, Audra, for sharing your ideas with us today. You certainly leave us all with great hope that women can have in financing a more resilient Asia. I'd also like to thank Hiroshi Matano from MIGA, Eko Suehi Yahin from the Insurance Development Forum, and of course, many thanks to Karen Groen from the World Bank. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel discussion in celebration of MIGA's Gender Leadership Award 2021 in honor of International Women's Day. Back to you, Atia.
Thank you very much to our panel for the lively discussion. This concludes today's event. I would like to extend a warm thanks to our speakers, the panelists, and Audra. I hope that today's event sheds light on both progress made and remaining challenges to addressing women's human rights and gender equality, as well as inspires and motivates you to want to work with MIGA to do more in this space. Our global wish for you today is that you have a very happy, safe, and healthy International Women's Day.